Who is going to speak about capital security budget?
Madam Chair, if you turn it over to me, I'm just going to turn to my left and turn it over to Major Meyerson or Captain Schroeder anyways.
Okay.
I suspect Major Meyerson will just turn it over to me, Madam Chair. So let me begin. Madam Chair and members, my intent today is to do a brief overview of the current capital security staffing that we have, exactly who makes up that detail, and then focus a little more attention on the $1.25 million that was appropriated additional budget this year and what we are doing with that money and where we're at in the process of hiring additional folks with that funding. So let me begin by saying that the current capital security staff that we have here is made up of one State Patrol captain, which is myself, one State Patrol lieutenant, and 37 full-time officers, capital security officers. Those are not licensed State Patrol peace officers. They are just capital security non-licensed officers that we have. Of that full complement of 37, we currently have 31 assigned to the Capitol complex. We are in the process of filling 5 positions that we have open at this time, and we hope to have those new 5 security officers hired by the middle of September. They should start their training program. In addition to that, we have 7 full-time dispatchers and 2 clerical staff personnel that reside here at the Capitol. With the $1.25 million that was appropriated additional for our budget this year, what we've done is we've looked at an assessment of the critical needs, and that assessment is based on the recommendations and guidance from the past advisory committee meetings. So our intent was, with that $1.25 million, to do as much as we can with that money in terms of stepping up security at the Capitol complex, but using the guidance of the advisory committee in terms of how we believe that that money should best be utilized at this time. So where we are at in that process, one of the recommendations was the hiring of an emergency manager, a full-time emergency manager that will oversee emergency management responsibilities for the Capitol area complex. That position description had to be written from scratch. So we've got the position description written. That description has made its way to our human resources, and it's been revised several times, revisions taking place to ensure that we can get the most qualified applicants applying for that position. That process will likely take a month and a half, 2 months before we can actually get that person hired and up and running. And the reason for that delay is that the position description is sitting at Human Resources. We intend to have Human Resources classify that position as soon as possible, based on the way the description has been written, and then move that position description through our process as rapidly as possible. I'm confident that we have full support of the Commissioner's office as well as our internal Human Resources division to expedite that process through. In addition to the emergency manager position, we believe that via the guidance and desires of the advisory committee that we really needed to focus on getting some additional armed personnel down at the Capitol area complex. So with the $1.25 million at this point in time, our intent is to hire an additional 6 full-time troopers that will staff the area complex. I'm happy to say that this past Monday, the 12th of August, was the first day that we've had an additional trooper down here at the Capitol complex. Our intent is to phase in the hiring of those 6 troopers. So we hired 2, and those folks, again, started on Monday. My intent is to hire 2 additional full-time troopers, probably in the October timeframe, mid to late October timeframe, and then have an additional 2 troopers hired by the first of the year, which will give us a staff of 6 full-time troopers, plus the captain, plus the lieutenant assigned to the complex. So we'll have 8 armed personnel staff here full-time reporting to the area, complex area. So that's a brief update of where we are, and we hope in the future that we will be able to appropriate more funding, possibly to increase our staff of full-time personnel. I know that the intent was 24/7 coverage. It's one of the things that Lieutenant Governor spoke of past advisory committees, some things that got written into law based on our initial recommendations for funding, what we were hoping to get. And we hope to have 24/7 coverage. Obviously, I can't provide that with just 2 likely even 4 additional troopers. When we get 6 troopers here, we can start looking at scheduling that, hopefully afford us as much in-depth coverage as we can provide for the Capital Area Complex.
Okay. Thank you, Captain Schrofer. Any questions? Representative Woodard.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Captain Schover, thank you for that. With this $90 million Senate office building that's being built, is there consideration of how that staffing is going to be affected by the addition of that building?
At this point in time, the troopers assigned to the complex are truly complex area-wide. So we will do what we can with the resources we have to ensure that we've got troopers patrolling the Capitol complex as much as we can. The new office building, we will need some additional resources, I suspect, for staffing at that building. And there's some other details that likely need to be worked out. However, 6 troopers, when you look at the total area here at the Capitol complex, 6 troopers doesn't go very far in terms of if we really truly wanted 24/7 coverage. What that provides us is 1 trooper on at any one given time. The 2 troopers that I had starting on Monday, I've got them scheduled in such a manner that I was able to schedule coverage for every day of the week, but not necessarily every hour of the day, obviously. And new facilities that are being built will definitely impact our ability to attend to the needs.
And Madam Chair, just a quick follow-up.
Representative Woodard.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a quick follow-up to that. So what I'd like to see is maybe in a future meeting as we continue to talk about this budget is your assessment of what we would need to do, not necessarily from a trooper standpoint, but maybe other personnel or other resources we would need to, because my understanding is that when that bill passed, there wasn't any allocation for security resources. So I think we ought to at least understand where we think that budget might head with the addition of the building. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Lieutenant Myerson.
Madam
Major,
I'll answer to anything, Madam Chair.
especially Lieutenant.
That works, and unless you know something I don't know. So, the emergency manager, in response to Representative Woodard, the emergency manager is really going to be a cornerstone of a lot of decision-making and analysis going forward. And we really have put this on the front burner to assist us in assessing what our needs are going to be, not only in the staffing, but the infrastructure, as we're trying to build in anti-terrorism, anti-criminal infrastructure into the design. We're going to have the expertise in someone who can actually dedicate the time and to manage those decisions and make those recommendations as we go forward.
Any other questions or comments? Okay. And advisors, feel free to speak up too if you have any questions. At this time, then, we will have a presentation on weapons on the Capitol complex and an overview and discussion of our current law and policy regarding weapons on the complex. So I'm going to call on Melissa Eberhard.
Thank you. I am the Policy and Risk Manager at the Minnesota State Patrol, and last month I was asked to put together the laws relating to firearms at the Capitol Security, and I provided a summary, and I think most of you have it in your packets. And, you know, many of you might be aware of these laws, but some of you may not, so it's worth going through so we're all on the same page. And it's kind of broken down into sections. The who, the where, and the what. Starting with the who, the State Patrol. Why is the State Patrol the ones providing security at the Capitol Security Complex? And that is provided for in statute. When we look at 299E01 and 299D03, it talks about the Capitol Security Director being a member of the State Patrol. And also part of the members' powers and duties is to provide security and protection to the governor, the houses, and state buildings. But, however, troopers are not security guards, as we commonly define that term. Troopers are, as Captain Schrofer mentioned, licensed peace officers, and because of this, are held to a different standard. Notably pursuant to 299D, 03, subdivision E, troopers swear an oath, and part of that oath is to uphold the federal or support the federal and state constitution. And I've listed examples of our internal policies that guide them in accomplishing that. They're called general orders. They are read and signed by all troopers and abided by most of the time. But the first general order talks about the trooper oath, including supporting the federal and state constitution. The second one I've listed talks about the fact that they cannot exceed their authority knowingly or violate any law knowingly or discriminate. And then the third general order I've listed talks about abiding by the Fourth Amendment and ensuring that all searches are reasonable. So I point this out because no matter what may be requested regarding securities, troopers must operate within those parameters. Now, looking at the where, the Capitol complex, it does present a challenge to balance the public nature of the building versus the safety of those working and visiting there. But what tools already exist in law? I point to statute 3.151, which is a provision that talks about intimidation of a legislator or disrupting the legislative body being a gross misdemeanor. So if someone is engaged in any of those acts, they can be charged with a gross misdemeanor. And also on the books, but not particular to the legislature, are the charges of obstruction, disorderly conduct, and trespass. So those are tools if there is misconduct at the Capitol. Now, provision 62472 acknowledges the right of the people to gather versus the ability to get work done without confusion and delay. And this statute authorizes rule promulgating to help strike that balance. However, it also does provide that interfering with the entrance or exit of a state or public building or interfering with public business is a gross misdemeanor. So that's provided for too. And then we do have actual administrative rules addressing Capitol security under Chapter 7525. There's not a lot there, just 4 or 5 sections. One, however, does allow for inspection of clothes, bags, and persons for very specific things, for weapons, explosives, or dangerous substances. And that is when the commissioner so directs. But in the next provision, it points out that possessing a firearm, either openly or concealed, is allowed on designated property if approval was first obtained from the commissioner. So that appears in Chapter 7525. Now turning to the what, the firearms. Many of us are familiar already with the permit to carry law found at 624.714. Public place is defined in 624.7181 and includes the Capitol complex. And if there was any doubt as to that, this issue is directly addressed in 609.66, which is the provision talking about possession of a dangerous weapon. And that's where language exists, where it specifically allows permit holders to carry in the Capitol and state buildings when they have so notified the commissioner. I point out in the summary that the statute only addresses in the buildings and not on the designated property outside of those buildings, like the other provisions talked about. So those are the laws that I found in my research. I should disclose that even though I have a legal background, I haven't directly worked at the Capitol or been much involved in the application of those laws. So if there are questions regarding that, I would defer to Major Meyerson or Captain Trofer.
Representative Paymar.
I have a question. I was under the, I understood, and I was at the last hearing, I think I was corrected that if you wanted to bring a firearm into the Capitol, you had to let the Capitol Security know or the commissioner know that you were bringing that firearm. But then I was corrected, or someone clarified the policy, and so I guess I need more clarification, is that once you're on the list, I understand that you can bring a firearm into the Capitol in perpetuity as long as you have a valid license to carry, which is sort of a different. Do I have that wrong, or was I told something wrong last week at our
You were
last
right when you
meeting?
stopped at, it's on there for perpetuity. There's no guidance as to the notification. It just says notifying the commissioner. It doesn't place any obligation after that on anyone after that. There's no sunset provision or anything regarding the list. It's notifying the commissioner.
So for
Period.
clarification, it means that you do not have to know when this person is carrying a firearm in the Capitol. If they're on the list, they can carry it. You don't know if they have it or not.
That's my understanding. I would defer to the captain or major if they want to speak further on that.
Representative Pamar, Madam Chair, and members, that is correct. The specific statute states that notification has to be made to the commissioner or sheriff. So typically, that's been in the form of an email that we often receive, that the commissioner's office often receives, just stating that I will be carrying a firearm on the Capitol complex. It asks for a permit number, an issued permit number, and the county where that permit was issued. And once they're on that list, they're on that list. Good.
Okay.
Madam Chair, I just hope the
Representative Pamar.
committee, whether I'm here or not, will continue to discuss that policy, because that's very different than I think most people understood. It's one thing to say I'm coming to the Capitol and I'm bringing my firearm and I have a valid concealed carry permit that's up to date. It's a very different thing to say that you're on this list that the commissioner has and you're on it in perpetuity and can bring a firearm into the Capitol complex anytime you want in perpetuity.
Representative Woodard.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A couple of questions, and I've got a follow-up from Representative Pamar, because that is an interesting question. But under the general orders that you described, it includes supporting the federal and state constitution, and then under the third general order, it says abide by the Fourth Amendment, all searches must be reasonable. And this may not be a question for you, it could be a question for Assistant Commissioner Danaski or part of the State Patrol. But why is the Fourth Amendment called out when it already is very specific that it includes supporting the federal and state constitution? Obviously, the Fourth Amendment, the Second Amendment, they're all part of the state or the federal constitution. Do you know why they call out the Fourth?
I can answer that question. I'm the policy manager, so I help revise these policies and write them. General Order 10-000 is the mission of the State Patrol. It's a very general order, and it includes the oath itself, which I swear to support the federal and state constitution, lay down my life in the line of duty, and all of those things. I included it so you would know that that's part of their oath, and that's what the oath says. But under 20.007, we talk about the Fourth Amendment because we want to give guidance to our troopers about proper searches and seizures, and that's dictated by the Fourth Amendment. So it's more detail about the procedures to follow in those cases where are investigating and searching or seizing a person. I hope that answers your question.
Representative Woodard.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I think it does. There is no general order regarding the Second Amendment, however, right?
No.
Okay. And then as a follow-up, Madam Chair, on the under 3.151, it talks about willfully disturbing or disorderly conduct in the legislature or intimidating members is a gross misdemeanor. Has there been occasions where, well, I guess, could you give me an example of what intimidation would be? I know that, you know, at the close of the last session, there was a little bit of a disruption on the House floor, in the gallery, I should say. Was that intimidation? Does that fall within the lines of that?
Well, I can give you the exact language, and I would have given you every statute thoroughly, but it was a lot of paper, and I wanted to summarize it down so everyone could more easily digest it. But the provision reads, a person is guilty of a gross misdemeanor who willfully, by intimidation or otherwise, prevents a member of the legislature from attending a session of the member's house or of a committee of it, or from giving the member's vote upon a question which may come before the House, or from performing any other official act. So if it prevented you from doing any of those things,
Okay.
then it's potentially a crime or a gross misdemeanor.
Okay. And then just one more follow-up as well, Madam Chair. I was actually, who's so notify the county sheriff. So you could notify the county sheriff, the Scott County Sheriff, that you will be on the Capitol grounds.
I disagree with that assertion. I think the statute talks about county courthouses
Okay.
and state buildings, and I think the statute reads notify the commissioner or county sheriff as appropriate. I think as appropriate is referring to the proper authority to notify. So if you're coming to the state building, you would notify the commissioner. If you're going to the county courthouse in Pine County, you would notify the Pine County Sheriff.
Okay, all right, thank you. And I said one final question. This is the one final question.
That's okay. There's no limit.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Under 7525.0400, it talks about reaffirming possessing a firearm openly or concealed is accepted from prohibited acts if individuals have obtained approval from the Commissioner of Public Safety. My understanding is that it's really a notification. Is there an approval process by the Commissioner of Public Safety?
I know. I mean, it's two different. The commissioner actually has to give approval in that instance. It's an affirmative act on her part. Notification is not an affirmative act on her part. She gets notified, and that's it. So I think it's two different things. We're talking about two different things. And I would defer to the major or captain if they know anything more on that.
Major Meyerson?
Madam Chair, Representative, members, we have operated since I've been here and this law has been enacted under the premise that if they have notified the commissioner, they've fulfilled the obligation under law.
Well, Madam Chair, I guess
Representative Woodard?
my question then, Ms. Earhart, is that in conflict? I mean, they're two different things. I guess I don't understand what the two different things are.
Well, the prohibited acts, there's a list of prohibited acts under the rules. The following acts in or on designated property are prohibited, and I can read you the language. And this is the rule I'm talking about. With the exception of peace officers and other individuals obtaining the approval of the Commissioner of Administration or the Commissioner of Public Safety, carrying either openly or concealed firearms, ammunition, or other dangerous or deadly weapons. That's a prohibited act unless you have obtained approval of the Commissioner or of Administration or the Commissioner of Public Safety. That's within the rule.
Well, thank you,
Representative Woodard?
Madam Chair. So, in essence, though, that is in conflict with what current procedures are, where there is no actual approval of your ability to do that, or of your right to do that. Is that right?
Well, I don't know if I can say it's a conflict or not. The statute addresses the crime of possessing a dangerous weapon.
Okay.
You know, and it talks about it from that aspect, whether it's a crime or not.
Okay. So in essence, Madam Chair, in essence, it's in order to receive a permit, right? So once you have a permit, that's the approval process, differentiated from the notification process that you're going to be at the state capitol grounds. Is that, I see a no?
There's additional approval after the permit. The commit, right? You get your permit, and then you have to notify the commissioner. The permit is not notification, from my understanding.
Assistant Commissioner?
Madam Chair, Representative, to what Major Meyerson commented on, I guess the approval, we would, in some way consider that once the commissioner is notified and then notifies Capitol Security that we have gotten the proper notification on it, that would be considered the approval.
Right.
Controls the Capitol.
All right, thank you.
Sorry.
I have a question, and then I'm going to call on Senator Benson.
Actually, my question was answered, so.
Okay. You said that the county sheriff also can give authorization, or
For his jurisdiction, the
for
county.
his jurisdiction. But I know that there are several counties, I don't know that everyone are posted as no weapons in this facility. So is that in conflict with this statute then?
I believe it is, but I haven't found authorization for that. I don't know if anyone else has anything to add on that. I mean, I don't know if anyone has sought approval from the county and not received that. I'm not sure about what the counties do, frankly.
Okay, any other questions about the discussion here?
And-
Senator Benson.
Madam Chair, in looking at under firearms 6.09.66 subdivision 1G, it refers to in capital or state buildings, so it does not specifically call out county buildings. County buildings are not state buildings, and so I think we might have a separate issue for the counties, but I don't think this notice specifically applies to county buildings, just capital and state buildings.
Well, it does talk about under 1G possession of a dangerous weapon within any courthouse complex. That was a separate subdivision that I did not include because it didn't pertain to the Capitol complex discussion.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Further comments? Melissa, as you were preparing, did you do any assessment of what happens in other states, or what other Capitol complexes allow the carrying of firearms?
Well, I did do some. It's difficult research to find, and I don't have the full capability to do legal research at this point. But I did notice a news story while I was preparing my research that happened in Texas during the abortion debate, where they were checking women for feminine products, but allowing firearms to come into the debate without any question. So there was... I know Texas allows firearms in the state capitol without question, so I didn't do a full analysis, though, of other states.
Okay, I was not aware that Texas did. In fact, in my travels, I've been asking. I've not encountered any state that does allow it, so.
Oh.
But I thought I had inquired about Texas, but maybe not. Representative Paymar.
Madam Chair, just to respond to that, I did have my legislative assistant look into this issue, and all states, of course, have different laws, but what we determined from doing a state-by-state analysis that 12 or 13 states allow firearms in their Capitol complex, the rest do not. And a significant, I can add them up for later, have weapon screening processes also. We are clearly in the minority.
Madam Chair,
Senator
perhaps
Benson.
Representative Paymar could enlighten us as to which states require a permit versus those states that just have an open door policy to weapons. Did you differentiate?
Madam Chair, Senator Benson, we did not. I just wanted to get an idea of, what other states are doing, and I think that's something this committee should look into. I mean, we're charged with public safety of the whole entire Capitol complex, and other states may be doing things that are better and that we can learn from, and so. I think it would behoove us to ask those questions and have staff get that information.
Well, I would agree. It would be advisable for us to know what other states are doing and how they're managing the security of their buildings and their Capitol complexes.
And Madam Chair, if we're going
Senator
to
Benson.
go down the path of investigating their weapons policy, this building is visited by school children because it has a museum quality. How many of those state capitals are purely offices for their legislators? Do they treat public hearings differently than the private office spaces? So if we're going to investigate, let's be fully informed as to what those facilities do as far as their weapons restrictions and the restrictions they place on their citizens when engaging in public discourse. I think that would be helpful because we do have a beautiful facility here. It is not merely office space. It is not merely for hearings. It is also a place where the public comes to view art and spend time with their families. And so let's get some perspective as to what other states do in environments similar to ours.
I certainly haven't been to every state capital, but I've been to many of them, and I would dare say that any of them would feel that their capital was museum quality, had art, many of them have revolving art, and have tours by children and visitors from throughout their states and other states too. I can only say anecdotally that people that have been on our complex from other states have raised the question of why we don't have security at the door, that they're surprised that anybody can just get into the building. And these have been families that have been coming in that have been encountered. So, but this is anecdotally, I agree. We had their assistant commissioner.
Oh, go ahead.
I would defer to the representative.
Oh, well, I just, it's not as important as what you have to say. I just was wondering if, Lieutenant Governor, if you've been to the North Dakota State Capitol,
No, it
describe that
looks
as
like
a museum
an office building. That one stands out as different.
Madam Chair, the International Association of Chiefs of Police actually has a division of Capitol Security representatives from across the country. Just spoke with Major Myers, and we'd be happy to reach out to that group. And while we may not be able to get all the states for next week's meeting, but we think we can probably get a pretty good summary of across the country what those facets are that the senator spoke of.
Okay, that would, I think, be helpful. At least it would be informative. Yes, Chief Justice.
The statute requires the committee to consult with the commissioner. And I know we have advisors here in the public safety department, but I'm wondering if the intention to hear from the commissioner herself.
Madam Chair, the commissioner does plan on attending next week's meeting.
Okay.
And
Yes.
if she could talk, or
She's just going to be here. We can ask her to.
Madam Chair, you can certainly ask her questions. I think that when you're referring to the statute, I think from the Commissioner's Office and from the Minnesota State Patrol's perspective, as Captain Schofer pointed out, when the resources were appropriated, we try to move in line with the guidance of this committee in that direction. I think that's what, in consultation with the Commissioner, in my interpretation, means is that we work issues out and saying this will work or that won't work, and work together with the committee to make sure we try to have the best process possible. Madam Chair, I guess, Justice, I should prepare the commissioner, I suppose, if you're going to ask her if she believes that there should be weapons on the Capitol complex or not, if that's the type of pointed questioning that you're looking at, or what should I refer to?
I'm interested in what the commissioner thinks about the issue of firearms.
I also, I want us to have a thoughtful discussion. I have no intention of doing anything in a knee-jerk reaction. My intention is to find out, what other capitals do, what is happening in other states. We've received several reports stating that there are threats to that our capital is vulnerable. We've been appointed to be advisory to the legislature and to the governor's office because we need to respond to those threats. We have a responsibility to protect the public that comes to this building. And so we need to be thoughtful about how we go about doing that and identifying what's the appropriate policy to adopt. So I don't want anybody to think that next week we're going to be proposing legislation or anything like that. We're in an exploratory mode. We want to find out what's going on, what do we need to know, how are we to prepare for things and be ready. And people will be given notice if we intend to recommend legislation, and there will be opportunities for public hearings if that were the case.
Madam Chair.
Senator Benson.
Will this committee be expected to vote on recommendations for legislation so that the weight of this committee would be behind any legislative recommendations going forward?
Well, I don't
Because
know
then
who would expect, I'm not sure who you, anything that we would recommend to the governor and the legislature, we would be expected to vote on yes.
Okay.
Yes, but I don't think it'll occur next week.
I'm not expecting that it would
Probably be a
occur
few months away.
next week. And Madam Chair, not to correct, but you talked about being made aware of threats. There might have been security threats, but what this committee's been made aware of is some weaknesses
Yes.
in our security, which is different. A threat implies a specific situation or a general circumstance where there might be threat.
And that's
to
why
person or
I
property.
changed my term to vulnerability.
And vulnerability is the correct, thank you,
Okay.
Madam Chair. But the commissioner does have the authority right now that if there is a threat, she could specifically call for searches, allows the inspection of people, closed bags, in or on designated property for weapons, explosives, dangerous substances. So we do have a provision that if there is heightened security alert from the Department of Homeland Security, or if our legislative offices receive some sort of notice, the commissioner is empowered to protect. Her hands are not tied by the statute. And so we need to balance what is in place and the discretion that we allow versus actions we might take going forward.
I want to watch my language. I think we need to be proactive. I think we need to be aware and not walk around with our head in the sand. We have to be aware of what the potential for threat is here. Newtown didn't know or expect that they were going to have a problem there either. I mean, I don't know how they would have planned for that. Those are the things that I think we need to be aware of. We can't just pretend that that's not out there and that there might be some crazy events that put a lot of people at threat and harm a lot of people. We need to be prepared in some way, and we need to think ahead and to have a plan for how we will protect the public. That's my concern. I think we can't just keep pushing it aside and saying, oh, well, we have never had an incident here, it's going to be okay.
And Madam Chair, the emergency manager would have a responsibility for a comprehensive view and risk assessment, not only for the continuity of the business of the state, but the safety of the public as they come here. One of the major functions of an open discourse is to give legislative feedback. And so the most secure thing we could do is close out anybody who didn't have prior authorization, but we won't go that far because it's not the right thing to do. So again, we need to balance
I'm
openness
sorry,
and security.
I was a bit distracted. What do you mean, close out anybody that didn't have prior
Well,
authorization?
in truly secure facilities, they only allow prior authorized people into the facility. We would never go that far because the purpose of this place is to have public discourse.
Why,
And
and
so-
because we don't know who they are.
And we particularly need to balance the need for security with the openness that is inherent in the legislative process and engaging with your government. And so this will be a long, ongoing discussion, but we should not leave the public thinking there is not a provision in place. The commissioner can come in and say, for these reasons, believe we need to step up security in these particular locations. So let's not leave the public with the impression there's not security here. There is security, and we are taking steps to enhance that security while being available to the public.
Representative Woodard.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I would echo Senator Benson's comments. And I don't think this is an exception, but I would just amend that to say I think we do need to be worried about moving towards an environment where you do need prior authorization to meet with your state representative or to be present in a particular debate in the gallery. I think what makes us special in Minnesota is access to elected officials. And I agree with you that it's good to look at what other states are doing and to see if there are things that we can learn from other states. But I think we have a long and storied history here in Minnesota of direct access. And I think we need to keep that into consideration, that this is not even judicial chambers. This is a place where people come to meet with their elected representatives. And I think we need to be very, very cognizant of, in our mission statement, about keeping this open both in perception and reality. With that, I do have a follow-up question for Ms. Earhart that you kind of sparked for me, if you don't mind.
Go ahead.
And if you don't mind, Ms. Earhart. So just to make sure that we're all on the same page and understanding, would I be able to enter the Capitol complex with a shotgun tomorrow under current law and statute? If I had notified the State Patrol that I was coming with a shotgun tomorrow, would I be able to do that?
I defer to Major Myerson on that.
No, Madam Chair, Representative members, this law pertains specifically to handguns, and shotguns would be deemed within the same. Bringing it into a Capitol building would be a dangerous weapon and would not be exempted under this statute.
Okay, that's what I thought. And then,
Well, could I ask how is that different from somebody wearing a handgun on their belt and on their hip and that's visible?
Madam Chair, the definition of the law is specific to handguns in regards to the exemption for those that have fulfilled the law. Yeah.
So
it's been-
just by law, law says this is dangerous, the other isn't. Is that
Yes,
what you're
it's-
saying?
They've designated it, I'm not saying the handgun isn't dangerous, but under the law, the letter of the law is we consider the handguns, that's what is authorized under the permit to carry, and they're allowed to carry, fulfilling the permit and notification of the commissioner.
May I ask one more question?
of course.
A knife? And they carry a knife on their belt?
It specifically talks about pistols, I think is the actual word used.
So
In
what
the
it
law.
does is it permits pistols.
And that's under the,
It
possession.
doesn't permit any other weapon.
Well, in that specific provision.
Okay.
Well, Madam Chair, I think we're going down the same route here. So if I do not have a permit to carry and bring a firearm, even if I notify you and bring a firearm onto the Capitol complex, a pistol, is that legal under current statute?
No, it's not.
Okay, so Madam Chair, the way it works today is it's not open access or open season for firearms in the Capitol complex. It is, they've gone through the permit to carry classes. They've been, approved by the county sheriff, gone through that entire process before they're allowed to carry legally on the complex. So I guess I don't want to leave the perception that there aren't already protections in statute for firearm use or firearm, well, certainly use is different, but bringing a firearm onto the Capitol complex, there is a vetting process that occurs before that happens. And then, secondarily, Newtown is certainly still fresh on our minds, but I would be very concerned if we decided that we just put up signs that say, no firearms allowed. I don't think that prevents anything of a Newtown kind of tragedy, because those folks who would be intent on that don't care what the sign says. And I think that would be something else we would need to consider as we go down this these deliberations or this process, that people who want to do ill may do ill, and that what we're talking about here is limiting the rights of legal firearm permit holders and their access to the Capitol. And I think that, to me, is really the crux of the question that we have to address over the next few meetings. And as I completely agree, this is not a decision that will be made by this committee. It'll be a decision made by the state legislature and the governor.
So I have a few questions myself. One of them was, how many permits are there to carry guns in the Capitol at this time?
There have been 832 as of this morning that have notified the commissioner and that we have listed.
And how do you know that they've been through training, and do they have to have a permit number or something that verifies that they've had, they're fully trained in how to handle that gun?
The notification Looking purely at the law, notification is made, and what's most commonly made versus what I suspect someone may make and still be within the law is two different things. What's most commonly done is we receive either an email or the Commissioner's office receives a letter such as this, basically stating that they have a permit. They'll oftentimes copy their permit, their driver's license, and identify where the permit was issued from, and that they intend to carry on the Capitol complex. When we receive that notification of that, their name is put on the list. There's no validation process that occurs.
Can I clarify?
Is that related to this? Okay.
To that point. So you said oftentimes. So I just want to be clear. So you, someone sends you an email, but they're not required to send a copy of the permit.
That is correct.
Thank you.
Are they always checked to see that that permit is valid?
No.
Okay. I think, I realize that these are people that are authorized to carry a gun, and there may be people in the Capitol that aren't authorized to carry a gun that are carrying a gun. I think I become more concerned, though, about being up in the balconies of the chambers during heated debate when people are invested in the way the legislation is going, and whether they're authorized to carry a gun or not. Not everybody has great control over their emotions and may not have had an incident where it would have invalidated their ability to have a permit to have a gun, but still have the potential to suddenly just lose it, and if the gun is available, can certainly create a scene. Now, I know this is true because I've experienced it myself. I saw a man killed in a heated argument, and I know other people that can say they've done the same thing. So you can't prevent something like that, but there is a possibility if we didn't allow guns in the chambers that you could at least minimize that type of an experience, I would think. I'm just raising issues. I don't have any answers myself. I'm just raising issues and concerns. Senator Benson.
And Madam Chair, a couple of things. If someone's permit expires and their name is on the list, and they come into this building, they've then violated the law, is my understanding. If they allow their permit to expire and bring a weapon here, they are now in violation of the law, whether they're on the list or not. So there's no get out of jail free card just because you sent an email. You have to have a valid permit. Is that correct, Major Meyerson?
That's correct. There's the two pieces too, and they have to fulfill both pieces, having a valid permit and also notifying the commissioner. And if they don't have the valid permit, then it's a felonious act to bring a handgun into the Capitol.
And thank you, Major Meyerson. And one more comment you talked about in the heat of a circumstance, and I agree. In heated circumstances, weapons are an issue. I think it would be useful for us to become more informed about what the process is for obtaining a permit, because the people who've gone through this process that I know leave the permitting process more concerned about how weapons are handled and more concerned about how you deal with situations, with a grave understanding of what happens if you draw that weapon, far more than the general public. And so I don't think permit holders should be the focus of the concern for safety at this Capitol. It's fine to have the conversation, but then let's have the full conversation, because the people who go through this process of obtaining a permit to carry are different when they come out of it, with actually more respect for the power of the weapon that they carry with them. And so let's make sure we have a full conversation about what happens when you get a permit, and keep our focus on the people who will come here to do harm and won't have bothered to go through any process, won't have notified anyone, won't have legally acquired a firearm, they're a greater risk to this body than anyone who's gone through the legal process.
What is the process of checking for guns in the Capitol?
Madam Chair, members, when we encounter someone with a gun that's carrying and we need to be able to identify that it is a weapon, I use the term carefully, we confront them and we ask for validation that they have a permit to carry, and then check that against the list that we maintain at Capitol Security.
Madam Chair, follow up to that?
Yes.
So, I'm sorry,
Senator
maybe
Faber.
I missed that. So as a matter of course you do that? You check the permit when, I'm
Yes.
trying to, okay. And, Madam Chair, so during the hearings that I held during the legislative session, did you check the attendees of those hearings?
When we became aware that someone was carrying a firearm, carrying a handgun, we did check them and reflected against the list that we had, and everyone that we checked, I don't have a specific number, they were compliant. They were in compliance with the law.
But if the gun was concealed, then you would have no reason to check?
If it's concealed, if we saw or became aware that they were carrying a firearm, we would confront the individuals and check. Correct.
Well, Madam Chair, this is probably for other discussions, but, if we're serious about looking at policy changes, maybe this committee does not want to make any significant recommendations to the legislature, but, I think we can see by some of the testimony that there's a whole lot of holes in our current policy, and so they have no clue whether someone's coming into my committee room or any other committee room, whether someone is carrying or not. Only if they see the firearm, I don't know if that's a reasonable recommendation, but it's certainly something that I would appreciate that this committee look at in the future, like what kind of authority do committee chairs have, or the speaker. If, for instance, Chief Justice, I know you have I believe in your building, I'm not positive about this, you have a sign prohibiting guns from being brought into your building. And I know when I was chairing the Public Safety Committee years ago, you all wanted metal detectors and didn't get them, as far as I know. But you also are aware of when there's a volatile case going on and, want that authority to, and you have the authority then to use those metal detectors, I believe. So I want to throw this out if we're not going down, I think people know my position on this issue. But if you're not going down that road, at least think through, talk about some reasonable compromises or solutions that might protect the safety of ourselves as legislators, as our staff, and the citizenry that comes in here. Say for now.
Suggestion.
You put a stop to the conversation.
I was trying to get it going.
Any of our advisors have any recommendations or suggestions or even thought-provoking questions?
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Is this one, I just want to make sure, because I should know all of our advisors, but is the memo from Stephen Swenson, is he a member, is he an advisor? And he is with the Center for Judicial and Executive Security. I would just like to note that if none of our advisors are going to make a recommendation, he did if you look at the bottom of the page, he said, "The introduction of firearms into the Capitol complex unequivocally increases the risk of targeted and indiscriminate violence to the office of the governor, legislators, elected, appointed officials, staff and employees, visitors, general public and constituents, and law enforcement and first responders. As provided under Minnesota state statute, the introduction of firearms into all Capitol complex facilities, including the state capitol, should be prohibited." Now, that's just one advisor, but I think it's important that the record.
He's a member.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
is Mr. Swenson available for questions?
No, he couldn't make it here today, but he wanted to leave his comments.
I guess I have some concerns about unequivocally. We had hundreds of permit holders here, and there was no increase in violence. And for those people who've been here for some of the most controversial legislation, the permit holders were the most calm and the most demure. And when the State Patrol approached them, I can only speak from the attendees' perspective. They were respectful and compliant. They understood the seriousness of what they were doing. And so for someone who's not even here and not subject to question, to say that there is, just by the presence of a firearm, an increased risk of targeted indiscriminate violence, yes. If someone walks off the street with a shotgun, yes, I would say there is intent to do harm. But a citizen of this state who has gone through the process of being permitted, someone who has gone through the process of notifying the commissioner, does not, by their presence, increase the risk of indiscriminate violence.
Well, this is one person's opinion, and
It's being given undue weight.
he's an
and he is not
advisor,
here.
and
Yes.
I believe he'll be present at the next meeting. But he wanted us to have his opinion at this meeting. And as Representative Paymar and I know, even those who are duly authorized to carry guns by virtue of a permit can send some pretty threatening, messages to people who wish to scrutinize their carrying of weapons.
And Madam Chair, in direct response, I have gotten some very clear messages just by body language from people about all kinds of issues, not just weapons issues. Being relatively short, having tall, in particular, men come up to me in a very heated protest-type environment is intimidating. There are all kinds of ways to intimidate people. So let's be really careful about impugning the character of someone simply because they carry a firearm.
Well, I would agree with you, and I wouldn't say it's necessarily just because you carry a firearm, but we do deal with volatility in the Capitol. There's no doubt about it. We have a hotbed here in the Capitol, and I think that we have to not pretend it doesn't exist. And I have had threats on my life. I believe others have too. I've had people say, I can follow you around, I can get you, I carry a gun. These are people that are permitted to carry guns.
Well,
I would need to have somebody clarify, but I think threatening the life of a public official is probably in violation.
Oh, but it's behind a phone, behind an anonymous phone call.
And please report those instances to Capitol Security, because I was told
I have.
immediately that that should be reported.
Sure. So, and I'm not saying everybody is guilty of that. I'm just saying there are instances. And so what do we do about those things? Certainly, we can't protect everybody from everything, but we also can't pretend that it doesn't exist. I'm sorry.
No, Madam Chair, I think that's a good discussion, and I would, again, echo Senator Benson's comments here. I think, certainly Mr. Swenson has a right to, present this to us. I look forward to being able to question him on it, because it is very strong language here, and I would like to know what it's based on. I know it's his professional opinion, but we have not, as we've discussed, not seen what he's recommending here as being an issue, that having permit holders on the Capitol grounds increases the likelihood of bad things happening. In fact, there's a good argument that it decreases the possibility of bad things happening, and I think that also needs to be explored, because that's certainly my belief. And as far as, threats, obviously you're threatened as an elected official, you're threatened as an individual. Those things can happen, and I would agree with Senator Benson that if they've happened, and it sounds like you have, is notify Capitol Security, because it's a great example of where it's the law, and it is violating the law of threatening an elected official. It's against the law of threatening somebody else as well. So it's a great example that laws are made, and they're made to be followed, but there's going to be occasions where people don't. And that's what we have to be aware of. And I would certainly argue that the threat from permitted firearms holders here in Minnesota is probably the least thing we ought to be worried about when it comes to threats against this building and the people in it. In fact, I would argue the opposite is true.
And we're all giving our opinions, just as Mr. Swenson is.
Madam Chair, the difference is Representative Woodard, Representative Paymar, and I are here willing to have a back-and-forth conversation. He's a committee advisor. I will have to look into what his background is. Was he a licensed police officer? Did he take security training? We say this is his professional opinion, but given that there is no scrutiny and no context, he doesn't even exempt licensed police officers or the sergeants at arms in his comments at the bottom. And so I would take everything here with a grain of salt until we have a chance to follow up with questions.
Any further discussion?
Madam Chair, the process, again, there's no public testimony today, and that
There is public testimony today, but it's not on, I've asked people that want to speak on the gun policies or weapons policy in the Capitol to please wait until next week to testify.
Madam Chair, are we concluding?
Because I did not know that we would even be finished with our discussion. So what we did was allow, I think, for about 5 minutes at the end, like usual, for public testimony.
And Madam Chair, are we concluding the discussion about firearms for today? I'd have a final comment if we are.
Is there any further discussion? You certainly can make your
Well,
comment.
Madam Chair, I wasn't planning on it, but since my position on the committee is unknown at this point, I have not received any word from the Speaker of the House that I am no longer a member. I don't know if you received a message, Senator Benson, but I have not seen it. But it's very possible with the amount of emails that I get that it somehow slipped by myself or staff, which would be unfortunate if that happened, because I brought this issue up at our last meeting. You asked specifically, Madam Chair, if there were any other issues that you thought that this committee should discuss in its broad overview of safety of the Capitol complex. And I brought this issue up, and I didn't hear anyone saying, that this was not a valid issue for this committee to discuss within the guidance of our mission. So you could have nixed that at any time you wanted. So could this committee. Senator Benson, 5 minutes after the committee ended, tweeted out that we were planning on doing this. So it's become somewhat, obviously, political, unfortunately. I was hoping that and I sincerely mean it, that whatever side you on gun control issues, that that we take a broader view of public safety. I mean, we're responsible for the school children that come into this building. We're responsible for the citizens that come and testify before us, whether it's at the state office building or this Capitol. We're responsible for our staff. I can tell you it was not pleasant for me or my staff when I held those hearings. And I get it that it's a volatile issue, and I've had some interesting discussions with people who oppose me on this issue. I wished we could find some common ground, and I would hope that the contentiousness of this issue doesn't get in the way of us having a discussion about this and really thinking it through. Otherwise, I think we're abdicating our responsibility. There's a reason that county courthouses have metal detectors. They're dealing with divorce, they're dealing with child custody, there's a reason why this occurs. There's a reason why most state capitals don't allow firearms in their capitals. I think we're living in a very different world today, and we deal with a lot of volatile issues, and Representative Woodard, I wish things were like they were generation ago, but they're not, quite frankly. And I just want to say I've spent 35 years of my life in the private sector and the public sector working on public safety issues, working on behalf of victims of domestic violence and sexual assault, and 6 years as chair of the Public Safety Committee, and I care about this issue deeply. It was not my intent at the last meeting to complicate matters here, I hope that going forward, whether I'm here or not, that you have that kind of deep discussion and critically think about what you're doing today, because we will all be held accountable for our actions. I thought I got the last word.
Well, I didn't vote on that. You're a member of the committee. Well, Madam Chair,
Representative
and I won't take away from Representative Paymar's final word there, with one exception, and that is that I do think that this needs to be a transparent process. I would take exception that it's a political process unless you say political is transparent. And I think certainly, Minnesotans do not expect their government to work behind closed doors, in the middle of the night while they sleep. This is exactly the kind of process, and I have no problem with Representative Paymar bringing this up as an issue. I think it does need to be fully vetted and fully seen in the light of day, so I appreciate that. But I think that's why, people want to know when we have these discussions, because they want to be a part of it. They want to know what their government is up to, and I think that's a very relevant thing for them to expect. Finally, I would make a motion, if it's appropriate to do that we postpone the meeting of the 20th. I do think there's too much up in the air about who the members of this committee are and what exactly is going to happen with this committee based on that membership. And I would move that we do that. And I do believe, both Senator Benson and Representative Paymar, as of today, are still members of this committee and would be able to vote as we see it. And so I do make that motion.
And Madam Chair, again, I do not believe I am a member of this committee, and I have received notice. It is in the Senate Journal that Senator Bill Ingebretson was appointed and that I was not. And so with all due deference to Representative Woodard, I do not believe I can vote.
Madam Chair, since I don't have that information, I don't know if I can vote or not.
Madam Chair, and I think that's actually a fair statement by Representative Paymar, that I don't know what the House Journal says about appointment, and I'm not sure the House Journal would reflect the appointments of this. I know I did receive an email from the Speaker that I would be reappointed to this committee. But I do think things are up in the air, and I guess I'm not going to get a second to my motion. I would just defer to you as chair that just from a fairness standpoint that we do postpone that meeting until we have clarity of who the members are, and to make sure that those, if there are new members, that they're available as well.
I have to say that we did receive notice just before the meeting that Senator Benson had been replaced by Senator Ingebrigtsen, but that he couldn't make the meeting today. And so there was a request that Senator Benson sit in for the meeting. And then when we arrived today, we found out that Representative Lane thought she had been appointed to the committee, and I knew nothing about it. So I figured it was something that we needed to check out. I'm not aware of any other complications in the membership or why it took so long for us to receive notification of that either. So, but I do know that it would be very difficult to schedule a meeting later. A lot of people have notified us they want to testify next week. I think that it would be difficult for us to delay it at this time. But if I hear that there are more complications, we're still unclear, we will delay it and find some other notice, or some other way to fit a meeting in.
And Madam Chair, I respect your decision on that. I would also like to have a report on what that means from maybe a legal standpoint. If Senator Benson wasn't a member of this committee and potentially Representative Paymar wasn't a member of this committee, and it's in the journal that that's the case, and that we've been operating without potentially a quorum because members have been voting that aren't members of the committee. I don't know what the ramifications are of that, but again, that's why I think it is more complex than just saying, well, Senator Ingebrigtsen and potentially Representative Lane are available for this meeting. There's some other legal ramifications here that I think need to be considered during that process. And again, that's another reason why I think it is a little more complex than just the two members moving forward.
Is the Assistant AG who is representing us here today?
So.
Okay, we'll check on that.
All right, thank you.
Any other comments? Any other business that you'd like to bring before the committee before we ask for public testimony?
Meeting. Is it the chair's intent that we would take action on questions that we're talking about today on firearms in the Capitol complex next week?
I wasn't anticipating that we would have any formal action to take.
Thank you.
We may ask for direction about, what we do with this now. But I wasn't anticipating that we would take any formal action. I think, and what we're asking from the public is advisement. No further comments? Okay, is there anybody in the public that would like to make some comments to us at this time? Please come forward. And then just give us your name for the record, please.
My name is Kevin Crystal. I have a Minnesota permit to carry. I actually just renewed in the last year. This whole discussion about, whether or not the rules or the laws or the signage prohibit firearms, I think is all moot unless the Capitol is willing to put in security at the level of an airport. Because as was pointed out several times, the bad people are going to walk right by the signs, they're going to ignore the law, they're not going to submit any permission slips, and the good people you don't have to worry about. That's my name is Kevin Crystal. I live in Chanhassen.
Okay, thank you. Ma'am?
Hello, Madam Chair and
Thank you.
committee, I believe. My name is Linda Windsor. I'm from St. Paul, and I had two comments. One, it was very hard to hear in the back, and I asked staff to do something about it, and it didn't improve. So I would say for the next meetings, if you could make sure, particularly your comments are projected out where we can all hear them, that would be very helpful. And the other thing is, I'd like to say that I was disappointed that most of the comments here today and discussion were about the rights of people to carry firearms and the safety of legislators. I was one of those people who attended nearly all of the hearings last winter, and I will tell you, people like me who don't carry firearms, who want to come up and participate in democracy at our Capitol, were intimidated. And for Senator Benson, I believe it's Senator, you weren't in the overflow rooms or the hallways where there was actually a request for more security and due to intimidating behaviors. So I just want to say I don't think our perspective was very well addressed today. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else that would like to address the committee?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, please.
I'm Michael Gerster. I'm the legislative director at the Oakdale Gun Club. We're 1,500 members strong, and that's who I represent.
Yeah.
The thing is,
You know what? I had said that I would take testimony on guns next
you're
week.
saying no testimony?
No, I was wondering if there's any overview, broad things that you'd like to bring up.
Yes,
before
ma'am.
us today.
You asked me who I was. I'm telling you. The thing is that one of the comment that I would like to make is that whenever we've had problems around the country, it's always been in a gun-free zone. The schools are gun-free. You have the theater, we're gun-free zones. And that's where the majority of the problems seem to occur, wherever there's a gun-free zone. And that's my comment.
Thank you. Sir?
Hi, my name is Matt Erickson. I'm from Cottage Grove. And I just wanted to say I think it's great that we have such a open Capitol. I mean, yeah, I don't want to get shot or anything, but it's really nice to me that we show courage to let the public come in and take this risk, because for me, true liberty means personal responsibility and trusting each other. And yes, things are going to happen, but I think when we're overly distrustful of each other, I think that creates a more hostile environment, more problems, and I would really like to see the Capitol stay as open as it is. I think it's an inspiration to all the other states in the country. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
No, thanks. Thank you. Ma'am?
Thank you very much for this hearing and the opportunity to say something. My name is Leslie Henschel. I'm a grandmother from Apple Valley and a concealed carry permit holder. I don't park right next to the Capitol building, obviously. I have to park in a parking lot some distance away. And hearing how few security guards there are, if I could not carry into the Capitol, I could not feel safe walking back to my vehicle. I'm responsible for my own safety. Therefore, I carry. If this building is protected, wonderful. What about the citizens walking back and forth to their cars? Thank you for hearing.
When we talk about the Capitol complex, we mean the whole area of the Capitol.
Yes, but what about the parking lot 2, 3, 4 blocks away that we walk in from?
If it's a Capitol parking lot, then it is part of the Capitol complex.
And you have somebody that would keep it safe at all times?
I'm not arguing with you.
Okay.
I'm just saying that all of it is the Capitol complex.
Yeah, I'm responsible for my own safety, not a few officers.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Patrick Watson from the Gun Owner Civil Rights Alliance. My question actually was, I had a question because I noticed some members of the committee are from the Sergeant at Arms office and the state troopers. And one of the other testifiers had said something about problems during the testimony this spring, during the hearings that Representative Paymar held. And I was curious because when we'd had direct discussions with Capitol Security after the hearings, they had said that the permit holders and the folks that were here to oppose the legislation were overwhelmingly law-abiding and polite and respectful. And I just wanted to find out if that had somehow changed in the interim. I hadn't heard there had been problems.
Sven, do you want to say something?
Madam Chair, Lieutenant Governor, members of the committee, from a Senate side, we had no incidents. We had no problems with any of the attendees during the gun-related hearings on the Senate side.
Okay, thank you. And Travis, you weren't here, were you?
I was here. I was
Oh,
here
you
for the
were.
debate. Yeah, for the hearings back in February. To my knowledge, no, there were no incidents. I believe there was moments of debate amongst people that were participating in the public viewing that may have caused intimidation, but wouldn't consider those incidents.
Okay. I will allow you just briefly to make your statements, because there were other people that wanted to sign up to speak today, and we said no. And so just briefly make your statements, and then we are going to close testimony. And if you wish to speak, then please sign up for next week.
Thank you. My name's Steve Noakes, and I'm from St. Paul, Minnesota. And I wanted to point out a couple of things. First of all, earlier when someone was up here and talking about intimidation in the hallway, I was in the hallway in, I believe it was March, downstairs when we had hearings. And I did witness a problem, but one of the pro-gun control people had initiated a conflict with someone who was pro-Second Amendment. And I just walked in between them and stood there and kind of broke it up without saying or doing anything, and that kind of ended it. But it wasn't the person who was legally permitted to carry a gun who initiated that situation. And that's how it really happened. That was the only conflict I saw during the entire proceedings. I'd also like to thank you for your time this morning discussing particularly Statute 624 and how it allows people to carry firearms in public with a permit. And I'd also like to reiterate that it defines government-controlled space as a public place. Therefore, this issue, in my eyes, has already been settled. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
My name is James Peterson from Maple Grove, Minnesota, and I saw an interesting correlation with just the number of armed police officers. I expected it to be much higher, not only for the safety of the representatives and everybody here giving public service, but for the individuals here who sometimes are in high-profile public testimony. Our proximity to Reverend Martin Luther King Drive reminds me of the fact that that gentleman who fought for civil rights, he had applied for a permit to carry. And I think we can all attest to the character of that gentleman. And those people that are coming here are sometimes under maybe more vulnerability than our representatives, especially as we leave. And sometimes showing our opinions in what we wear or how we act. And our rights to protect ourselves, I think, are very important. And if we weren't allowed to carry firearms on the premises, would there be a place where we could check them so we could have our weapons as we left?
Thank you. Sir?
My name is Gary Thompson. I'm from St. Paul, Minnesota. And I want to affirm what Linda Windsor said, that when we had hearings last spring, there were many members of our group who were too scared to come because of so many people were carrying weapons. And this has been mentioned to me several times, but I've been in the service. I'm not necessarily scared of weapons, but I could see and feel the intimidation throughout the hallways and in the overflow rooms. That it was definitely a presence at all the hearings, and I just want to mention that.
Thank you. Well, thank you for everybody who came to the meeting today, and we are looking for public input, and we are looking for further discussion at the committee level, too. So, thank you. Meeting adjourned.